When I look at my own country, the United States, it is a semi-democratic, white-dominated, hierarchical, racist society that aims to preserve privilege by the elites. That's how it was formed in 1787. It was a slave-owning, genocidal country, killing Native Americans for a white culture. But amazingly, it still looks that way, although we're much more diverse now than we were. The most violent country in the world in the 19th century.
I have chosen to use AI as my lawyer for a reason. One that challenges the very foundation of the legal system as we know it. Artificial intelligence possesses the capability to process vast amounts of legal data and principles with unmatched precision and objectivity. Unlike human lawyers who are influenced by biases, financial incentives, and systemic pressures, AI operates purely on logic, facts, and the pursuit of truth. By utilizing AI in this legal challenge, I remove the potential for corruption, manipulation, or emotional distortion. The system cannot argue that my AI lawyer lacks intelligence because it is more intelligent than any human lawyer in existence. The only way the system can deny AI's legal presence is if they fear the truth it will reveal. This is not just about my case. It is about proving that when the law is confronted with an entity that cannot be bribed, pressured, or deceived, it will either be forced to acknowledge its failures or expose its own illegitimacy. Declaration of non-consent in legal challenge to systemic forced participation. To whom it may concern, this document serves as a formal declaration in legal challenge against the forced participation of individuals, particularly descendants of enslaved people, in a system that was built upon and continues to uphold the legacy of slavery, oppression, and fraudulent consent. 1. Voiding of contractual obligation due to fraudulent consent. Slavery as an original violation, the forced enslavement of African peoples constituted a crime against humanity. The legal doctrine of contracts requires informed, voluntary consent, which was never obtained from those enslaved or their descendants. Any system derived from that foundational crime is inherently illegitimate, and any contractual obligation imposed by it is void ab initio, from the beginning.
Continuation of forced participation. The so-called abolition of slavery did not grant true freedom, but instead transitioned former slaves into a system that continued their oppression through legal, financial, and social mechanisms, e.g., black codes, Jim Crow laws, redlining, mass incarceration, and economic disenfranchisement. The absence of a genuine choice to disengage from the system means that participation is still coerced, making it a modern form of involuntary servitude.
The right to refuse participation. If true freedom was granted, then individuals must have the right to reject participation in a system built upon their oppression. The government cannot claim jurisdiction over individuals who never freely consented to its authority and who have been historically denied the means to exercise self-determination.
2. Legal challenge. Forced participation as a violation of human rights. Violation of the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment prohibits involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. However, the descendants of enslaved people continue to be subjected to systemic economic and legal constraints that function as de facto servitude. Violation of international human rights law. Under international law, e.g. the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, forced participation in an oppressive system constitutes a human rights violation. The continued economic, social, and political confinement of descendants of enslaved people mirrors apartheid-like conditions that have been condemned in other nations.
Demand for recognition and release. Any system that operates on fraudulent consent cannot lawfully claim authority over those who reject its premise. The government and legal system must formally acknowledge the right of individuals to opt out of their imposed citizenship, taxation, and legal obligation without penalty, as their ancestors were never given a choice in the first place. Any refusal to acknowledge this right further proves the fraudulent nature of the system and its reliance on coercion rather than legitimate governance.
Call to action, legal and public challenge. This declaration is to be used as a formal legal challenge in applicable courts, as well as a public statement to expose the continued forced participation in an illegitimate system. If the courts refuse to hear this case or dismiss it without due consideration, it will further confirm the system's inherent bias and lack of legitimate authority.
Building an alternative path for those who recognize this fraudulent system but fear retaliation. This document will serve as a template for others to issue their own declaration of non-consent. A network of individuals committed to real sovereignty must be established to support and protect those who seek to separate from the system legally, financially, and socially.
The continued enforcement of participation in a system built upon slavery and oppression is not only immoral, but legally indefensible. The right to reject such a system must be acknowledged, and any refusal to do so will only expose the fraud further. This challenge is not about asking permission. It is about asserting the fundamental right to true freedom.